It couldn't be more interesting. Of course, latest series of polls essentially show a statistical dead heat. All the polls seem to agree that it's former municipal judge Desiree Charbonnet, Council District B Councilwoman and mayoral candidate Latoya Cantrell, and former Civil District Court Chief Judge Michael BAgneris in a statistical dead heat. They're tied. Some showed Charbonnet first, some showed BAgneris first, one shows Cantrell first. But what's interesting in this whole dynamic is, in many ways, not only the appeal for the undecided vote, which is massive. We're talking about nearly half the electorate in almost all the polls, but also the appeal for the youth vote, which honestly, we've never really seen a focused way in an election. You see Latoya Cantrell in particular making massive appeals to millennials. A lot of her meet and greet events are based on places like Ale and Oak on Oak Street and others, trying to appeal to this demographic. And some of the tumultuous stuff that's happened in the mayor's race recently, Steve, including a rather negative series of ads, were in many ways not just trying to attack Desiree Charbonnet, but in a way trying to dissuade, we can explain why, some of the youth vote that may have been trending in her direction. I will tell you this, it's an exciting race. No one knows who is going to be in the runoff. It could be any of these three people. It's based on a few factors: where the Republican and white vote's going to be, what turnout dynamics are going to be, and most importantly, if anything goes wrong in the final stretches. But it's probably I can't remember a mayor's race where you didn't know at least who one of the runoff candidates was going to be, and you literally, I can tell you, you're not sure. Of course, the other wild card is the fourth runner in this race, Troy Henry. Troy Henry, at this point, likely will not be a runoff candidate. But what he could be is a kingmaker. He's pulling, depending upon the polls, between 4 and 7%. Some say as high as 9%. What he has done is he's got a core of support that would otherwise go to one of the other candidates, and it's fluctuating as to who. The most natural person he would be drawing support away from is Michael BAgneris. They appeal to a lot of the same demographics: pro-business, pro-economic development, so on and so forth. But there's also his vote is impacting Cantrell, and to some lesser extent, Charbonnet. So it is, if he rises, this could put everything on another bend, and we frankly don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks.
Now, you're talking about the youth vote.
Yeah.
And who do you think is, at this point in time, leading that vote?
Well, the obvious answer would be that Cantrell's appeals to the youth vote, and by youth vote, I'm not talking about 18-year-olds. I'm talking about young professionals between the ages of 25 and 35, millennials, the so-called hipsters that have been moving into New Orleans, that being socially active, those that may have arrived after Katrina and now have young families. That's what I mean by the youth vote. And Cantrell has made the most obvious appeal to it, and at first glance, you would say, that's one of her core support. Her entire race being predicated on neighborhood activists. Remember, Latoya Cantrell is the former head of the Broadmoor Improvement Association. She was noted for fighting the green dotting after Katrina. So that's how she built her reputation. But also on this sort of young professional, what we would have called back in the 80s the yuppie vote coming out of it. But the millennials have their own set of interest, and that are a little different than the past. But I will tell you that when this race started, Desiree Charbonnet was pulling a tremendous amount of these votes as well. And the reason was she's done a very good job at appealing at young women and sort of speaking to their ideas. She's very good in a room. She had a core entree of young female support, and it seemed to be one of her pillars. If you had to describe Desiree Charbonnet's coalition, she's from a prominent old 7th Ward family. Her brother, Bunny Charbonnet, is a legend in New Orleans politics. Of course, Desiree has won citywide multiple times, not just for judge, but she was the former reporter of mortgages. She's run citywide. She has the establishment vote in the African-American community in many ways, but she was building up, trying to get some of the young votes, some of the disaffected vote, some of the leaders vote, even in the white community. And it was seeming that she was going to pull enough of that to not only guarantee a runoff spot, but a pretty formidable position going into winning a runoff. She certainly had the most amount of money. That's been changing in the last few weeks when it's gone. Michael BAgneris has also made appeals to the young vote, but his vote tends to be sort of the African American middle class, the older African American middle class that voted against Mitch Landrieu the second time, along with traditionally, and this is the interesting little wrinkle in this race of how it was, the Republican vote, the white conservative vote. It's worth remembering Michael BAgneris has a lot of this support 4 years ago because he took on Mitch Landrieu, and he did it very openly with the GOP's endorsement. This time, of course, he was the one candidate. He broke it on my radio show. If you can do a shameless plug, my radio show's on WRNO, 99.5. I used to be a reporter there, and I now host the Sunday morning Meet the Press show called Founders Show, along with Hy McHenry, that also is rerun Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays on WSLA 1560 AM from 8 to 9. On my radio show, he actually endorsed the concept of having a referendum before the monuments came down. And he has pushed this, and this has got him the support of Frank Stewart, of a lot of the Monumental Task Committee members, but a lot of the conservative Republican business. And he looked like a shoo-in to get the Republican vote in this election. He's still, according to the polls, the latest Inside poll, leading on that demographic. But when he went in to get the official endorsement, what's called the Parish Executive Committee, he lost it very narrowly. They're closed-door sessions, but I have people that told me what happened. And it was, at the time, if you remember, it looked like BAgneris was not going to make the runoff. It was going to be a runoff between Desiree Charbonnet and Latoya Cantrell. BAgneris was running a very distant third. And so narrowly, by 1 or 2 votes, it went for Charbonnet. Apparently, this hasn't had much effect on the rank and file vote, but it's given Desiree Charbonnet enough support to where she's been able to maintain a pretty comfortable first place by just having a sliver of sort of the Republican leadership and enough of the white vote to give her a strong position. That's why I'm saying you don't know who's going to be, because a lot of this is fluid. And if I had to say it like this, if she's gaining anything beyond Charbonnet, beyond the youth, she's getting some young Republican votes, and that's the question, the answer part of the youth vote, because she's made an appeal to groups like the Greater New Orleans Republicans, which, despite the name, is the young Republican group in the city of New Orleans. She's done that. So, and remember, Republicans are a minority in the parish of Orleans. It's a very Democratic city, a very blue city. But the white vote and the Republican vote has been the kingmaker vote the last few elections. Never forget how Ray Nagin won. He got a sufficient portion of the black vote, and he was crowned by the white vote. I actually don't think that's going to happen this time. The white vote's pretty evenly divided in different ways between the candidates. I'm going to predict whichever 2 candidates gets the most polarities of it are the ones in the runoff, because the black vote is also equally divided.